Ever wondered what actually happens, behind the scenes of TV advertising? It's way more dynamic and honestly, surprisingly more challenging than you might think,
Yeah.
especially somewhere like Tokyo. So today we're doing a deep dive into this fascinating world of impression-based TV ad sales. We're focusing specifically on the potential for Tokyo's main television stations.
Right. And we're drawing our insights here from a really comprehensive study by Programmatica Inc. It gives a detailed look at ad revenue for the first 3 quarters of fiscal year 2024. And it also sort of maps out a path forward for these big broadcasters.
Okay, so our mission today, we want to unpack why the unit price for regular linear TV advertising in Japan has stayed, well, surprisingly low. And then explore how maybe a bold shift really, to impression-based trading could redefine its value and maybe even potentially win back audiences. Okay, let's get into it. So let's kick off with the current financial picture for Tokyo's key TV stations. And actually, on the surface, there's some good news. We've seen a slight increase in revenue across the board for Q1 and Q3 of FY 2024, which is, a welcome rebound after that year-on-year decline they saw in FY 2023. Spot advertising, specifically, performed pretty well from June onwards.
That's true. There has been an uptick, but it does come with some pretty important caveats. Even with that revenue growth, the overall costs for these broadcasters have also climbed. A big factor there was major events like the Paris Olympics, remember? Running from late July into August, those large-scale things, they really drive up production and broadcasting costs. So continued financial pressure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about streaming versus traditional broadcast? That seems like a bit of a mixed bag too, right? I mean, streaming ads show strong growth everywhere, which sounds good. But when you actually look at the numbers, it's still a really small slice, only around 4 to 6% of total ad revenue. It just hasn't reached a scale where it can, truly replace the traditional broadcast side yet. Though we should probably note, TV Tokyo TX, they report a higher share. But that figure, it includes revenue from distribution rights sales too, so it's not quite an apples-to-apples comparison on ad revenue alone.
Exactly. And another thing adding complexity is this, pervasive market uncertainty. The Programmatica study actually calls out what it terms a serious problem for Fuji TV, or CX. It stems from that whole suspension of commercials due to a scandal with a former TV personality, and that makes predicting their full fiscal year 2024 revenue super difficult. And it's not just CX. That uncertainty kind of ripples out and affects projections for the other stations too. That's really why our analysis here is leaning mostly on the first half figures for FY 2024, just for a more, stable baseline.
Okay, got it. So digging into the details a bit more, Nippon TV, NTV, still leads in overall ad revenue, both spot and time ads included.
That's right. They're still the leader.
And for spot ads specifically, the other stations usually cull in something like 65 to 80% of NTV's revenue, excluding TX, I guess.
Generally, yes, that's the range.
But here's something interesting the study mentioned. TV Asahi, EX, they actually reported tying their previous record, a 23.3% share of the Tokyo spot market, putting them in second place.
Yeah, that was a notable point. And if you look at the ratios, the mix between spot and time advertising revenue, NTV at 105% and EX at 107%, they actually generated more from spot ads. But then you look at TBS TV, they're at 95%, TX at 56%, and CX at 93%. They all earned more from time sales. And this isn't really new. This pattern held through 2023 as well. It shows a pretty fundamental difference in how they're monetizing their inventory right now.
So this whole picture, it really shows the tightrope Japan's broadcasters are walking. They're balancing these traditional revenue streams with the newer digital ones, but they're also facing these, significant economic headwinds and some pretty unique market challenges. It definitely sets the stage for what we need to talk about next, which brings us to what the study sees as the core challenge, these surprising physical limits on linear TV advertising itself. Using data from TVL, they're a big TV audience data provider in Japan, we find out that if you count the program promotional slots, almost all the broadcasters are pretty much hitting the total commercial volume limit set by the Japan Commercial Broadcasters Association, the JBA. And that limit says commercials can't be more than 18% of weekly airtime, which works out to about, 7,250 15-second spots a week?
Yeah, roughly that. And of that total volume, about 70% were spot commercials. So the takeaway is simply trying to increase the number of ad slots isn't really a viable way to boost the business. They're already at or very near the maximum. I mean, sure, they could technically use subchannels to add more time, but the study points out that's generally not seen as ideal from a, viewer experience standpoint. The core issue is fixed inventory.
Okay, but here's the real kicker, and this feels like a huge piece of the puzzle. The unit price. The actual cost of TV advertising on Japan's linear TV is just shockingly low. When you compare it using CPM, that's cost per 1,000 ad impressions, the price difference can be almost tenfold. 10 times lower than premium connected TV or CTV advertising.
It's a massive gap.
It really is almost unbelievable when you first hear it.
So yeah, one pretty clear path to bridge that gap and seriously boost revenue is to raise the unit price of these TV commercials. And the way to do that is through impression-based trading. But what's really fascinating, and something Programmatica highlights, is that increasing the unit prices this way, it could actually lead to a reduction in the total number of commercials shown.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, if each impression is worth more, you don't need to sell as many slots to hit revenue targets. This could make TV ads much more acceptable to viewers, improve the overall experience quite a bit.
Right, and the implications there are pretty profound. By raising unit prices with impression trading, stations could boost revenue and reduce ad clutter. That directly tackles a major viewer complaint, right?
Yeah.
And could potentially draw audiences back to linear TV, people who've maybe drifted away in recent years. It really sounds like a win-win if they can actually pull it off correctly. Okay, let's shift gears a bit now and talk about audience impressions and why just applying one single approach across the board is, well, deeply flawed for this market. Programmatica's got these unique estimates using TVAL data again, showing the number of impressions broken down by demographic for the key Tokyo stations, male-female segments. And yeah, it's not exactly news that the audience is aging. The proportion of older viewers is going up everywhere, we know that. But Programmatica's data, it shows a really critical nuance here.
Precisely. Because what really defines the station's premium inventory, what advertisers really care about, isn't just the overall age shift. It's the absolute number of younger viewers. Programmatica lumps these into MF1, that's men and women aged 20 to 34, and MF2, those aged 35 to 49. And the study shows there are really significant differences between the stations in both their audience mix and the actual absolute number of impressions they get from these crucial younger groups.
Okay, and this is where the disadvantage part comes in, right? If a station doesn't have a huge amount of commercial inventory for a specific, really desirable target like those younger demos about, if they were to join some kind of cross-station deal focused only on that single segment, they'd be at a big disadvantage because the proportion of those premium slots within their total inventory would be high, making them seem scarce relative to their overall airtime.
Right. Now, of course, if transactions could happen at a CPM way higher than today's levels, the potential for more revenue is there. But balancing that is the tricky part. And just to give everyone some context, a baseline, the average CPM for all individuals, just based on weekly spot revenue for the first half of fiscal 2024, it looks like this. NTV is at $3.02. EX is $3.14. TBS, $2.79. TX $2.94, and CX is $3.20.
$3, wow.
Yeah. Now, just remember, premium CTV advertising, that can range anywhere from $15 up to $50 per 1,000 impressions.
Okay.
So don't be too disheartened by how low those linear numbers are, but that's the reality they're working with right now.
Okay, let's run a thought experiment then based on this study to really get our heads around this. What happens if we try impression trading, but just for one single, highly sought-after segment? Like F1, that's women aged 20 to 34. What happens at different CPMs? The results the study lays out are, well, they're pretty eye-opening. So, first scenario, a CPM of $46, which, okay, is way higher than the current $3 average, but still potentially below top-tier CTV. The outcome. It's really stark. Only NTV actually sees its estimated total revenue go up by about 15%. But for stations like TX and EX, we're talking huge revenue declines. TX down 41%, EX down 37%.
Ouch.
Yeah. It immediately shows a risk, right? A single segment approach like this would just crush stations whose audience isn't heavily weighted towards that specific premium demographic. Okay, what if we push the CPM even higher? Say $60. Now, NTV gets a really significant boost, plus 50%. TBS gets a respectable, plus 18%. CX gets a modest, plus 6%. But look, EX and TX are still showing revenue declines.
Still underwater. Exactly. It shows even a higher price isn't enough to make up for that mismatch in audience composition for that one specific target. It's only when you get to a really, really high CPM, like $80, that all the Tokyo stations finally break even or exceed their current revenue. NTV sees a massive 99% jump. EX gets 10%, TBS 57%, TX squeaks by with 2%, and CX hits a healthy 42% increase.
Right. So this whole experiment, it just clearly demonstrates why a one-size-fits-all strategy, trading just one premium segment like F1, is basically a non-starter. I mean, yeah, the numbers might look okay on paper at $80 CPM, but trading F1 at that price, it's just completely unrealistic, especially when even highly targeted CTV ads on premium shows top out around $15 to $50.
Right.
So the real insight here is that forcing impression trading for a single segment uniformly across all stations, it would just create massive winners and massive losers. It would jeopardize the whole transition. Each station's unique audience mix really demands a highly customized strategy, one that values different segments at different rates to make sure it's a workable shift for everyone involved. Okay, so given those clear challenges with the one-size-fits-all idea, it seems obvious that an impression trading system needs to be tailored to each station's unique characteristics. And this is where Programmatica brings in this concept of trading based on total impression evaluation.
Exactly. Let's look at some of the specific strategies the study suggests, tailored to each station's audience profile. Okay, first, TV Asahi, or EX. Their audience mix naturally points towards what Programmatica calls an all-target strategy. So instead of just hyper-focusing on F1, they could set competitive but different CPMs across various demos. For instance, maybe $10 for MF1, the 2034s, and say $6.70 for MF2, the 3549s. And then they could average something like $3.14 for the older groups, MF34, 5064, and MF4, 65+. This kind of broad, balanced approach could potentially boost their growth rate up to 132%.
Okay, interesting. What about TBS?
Right, TBS TV. Their audience is somewhat similar to NTV's, but an F1-only approach would still need that unrealistic $65, $70 CPM to bring in enough revenue. So the study suggests it's much more profitable for them to do impression trading with, again, competitive but varied CPMs, maybe $17 for MF1 and $10 for MF2. And they could also expand their targets, maybe create packages around something like LTV 459, that's everyone aged 4 to 59. But the key is segmenting that group into multiple tiers with non-uniform CPMs, creating more efficient package deals that way.
And TV Tokyo TX. They're known for having specific audiences, right?
Yeah, TV Tokyo TX is a really interesting case. They're known for attracting viewers who, as the study puts it, go out of their way to choose and watch specific programs. Very intentional viewing. So this unique viewer behavior actually allows for more aggressive, highly focused CPM settings for certain niche segments. For example, M12, that's men 2049, could be a primary target with a CPM of, say, $13, while F12, women 2049, and MF34, 5064s might be peripheral targets priced lower, maybe around $2.94 at the current average. They could also target broadly with something like all plus sub U39, that's everyone plus under 39s. For TX, the key seems to be this idea of package development, creating unique impression trading packages that leverage their loyal selective viewership.
Okay, and finally, Fuji TV CX. That sounds like a critical situation given the issues mentioned earlier.
It is. For Fuji TV, or CX, it's definitely a critical juncture. Because of that commercial suspension issue, CX has apparently revised its internal estimates. They're aiming to reduce the total number of impressions by around 15%, maybe by cutting the number of commercials by 15%, while maintaining the same level of total revenue as before. That's basically a projection designed to minimize the damage.
Right.
The huge challenge for them is raising their average CPM, which is almost impossible with the old GRP-based trading system. But this newly introduced idea of impression-based trading, it presents a really strong opportunity for them to transform. It could potentially allow them to not just offset the negative impact, but maybe even turn it into a positive. Currently, they're estimating revenue even with the CPM setting below $6 based on a target called Core Plus 10, which is men and women aged 1359. So there's potential there with the new model.
Wow. This deep dive really shows how something that sounds simple, shifting from traditional ad sales to impression-based trading, is actually anything but straightforward. It really demands these incredibly nuanced, station-specific strategies. You absolutely have to factor in the unique audience compositions and market positions for it to work.
Absolutely. We've really explored the intricate world of Tokyo's TV ad market today, from the surprisingly low unit prices and the fixed inventory problem to the challenges of diverse audience demographics, and ultimately the critical need for a tailored impression-based sales approach that really plays to each broadcaster's unique strengths.
So as this whole journey to correctly value TV advertising using CPM is really just beginning, it leaves us and you with some pretty compelling questions to think about. Like, what audience segments should actually be traded under this total impression-based evaluation? And, crucially, at what specific CPMs? And maybe even more importantly, how could this new approach be packaged? Packaged in a way that's genuinely clear and beneficial for both sides, the TV stations selling the ads and the advertisers buying them. And ultimately, how might these shifts redefine the true value of TV advertising? and maybe reshaped what you, the viewer, actually experience on your screen. We really hope this deep dive has given you plenty to chew on and maybe sparked your own curiosity to explore it further. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.